Useless old fool who can't even do housework. Get out of here. My husband and I, who live with our eldest son and his wife, put $2,000 into the household every month. Despite this, I was verbally abused by my eldest son's wife, who told me to leave. Moreover, she doesn't just verbally abuse me, she also harasses me, and my husband and I finally reached our limit. I don't want anything to do with a woman like this anymore. I hope she becomes unhappy. I firmly decided to make sure she suffers. I am Miranda. I'm a 62-year-old housewife who also works part-time. I live with my husband Jack, who is the same age as me. Jack is a serious and kind salaried worker who makes a decent income, and we have never had a major argument. We have a 32-year-old son named Ronald. He's very similar to his father. He is a very kind-hearted person with a strong sense of justice. After graduating from university, he found a job at a general company and has been working hard every day. 2 years ago, he met a woman named Alice, who also works at the same company, and they got married. But Alice is an incredible devilish woman. My first impression of Alice was that she was a serious and cute woman. I heard from Ronald that she has a good reputation from her superiors at work for her serious attitude, and I didn't have any negative impressions of her. Alice was 6 years younger than Ronald, so I was worried if they would be able to get along because of the age difference. But I felt that it would be okay for them to get married. When Ronald and Alice got married, they started living in a rented apartment. After getting married, she said she wanted to support Ronald, who was busy, and she quit her job to become a full-time housewife. He seemed to be very grateful for her help.
Alice does all the housework, so I can concentrate on the job I love. I'm really grateful.
My husband and I were delighted to hear this and thought that Ronald had married a wonderful person, but she gradually started showing her true colors. At a gathering of relatives during New Year's the following year, I saw Alice again. But at first, I couldn't recognize that the person in front of me was Alice, because her appearance had drastically changed from Alice I knew. The last time I saw her, I thought she had dark brown hair and simple makeup. She looked very much like a modest woman you might see in an office. However, now she had transformed into flashy makeup and blonde hair. With a flashy bracelet jingling around her wrist, it's hard to believe it's the same person. My husband, along with the other relatives, was taken aback by her drastic change. Perhaps noticing everyone's stares, Ronald started to speak.
I'm sorry for surprising you. One day when I came home from work, Alice has suddenly transformed into this. I was quite surprised myself. But she still does all the housework properly, and there's nothing wrong. Besides, she is a full-time housewife, right? Can't you forgive her?
Hearing those words, I felt relieved. If you are okay with it, then that's fine. I was just surprised because her appearance has changed so much. I'm sorry. It's not good to judge people based on their looks, and it's not my place to interfere anyway. When I said that, the atmosphere among the relatives eased up, like they agreed with me. Afterwards, we were all enjoying drinks together, but then Alice caused quite the scene. She was in a drunken state and started hurling insults at everyone around her. Hey you! Do you think you can defy me? Back in middle school, I knocked down 3 of my classmates at once. It seemed she had a terribly bad habit when drunk. She even started to curse at me and my husband. You all shouldn't live so long. Nobody is happy about it, you old fools, she shouted loudly. Her words hurt me deeply. There are things you shouldn't say even if alcohol is involved. My husband was also visibly angry.
Even if it's a drinking party, you're saying too much. Apologize now,
Ronald warned her. However, Alice didn't stop. She even turned against Ronald. What? You dump all the household chores on me, and you dare to lecture me? Besides, I could knock down a weakling like you in an instant, she continued to rage on, cursing everyone in sight and causing distress to everyone. And then she fell asleep drunk. it was finally quiet, but the atmosphere was terrible. Everyone was angry with Alice's behavior. And then a relative opened their mouth.
Alice said something about knocking down classmates. Was she a delinquent? No, she's a graduate of a national university, and she's basically a good, serious person.
But the relatives who saw her rampage earlier seemed skeptical.
Ronald, you say that, but is there a solid proof that she has lived a serious life? Maybe we should look into her past and character?
I agreed with the relative's suggestion. Ronald, who witnessed this commotion, seemed suspicious and promised to investigate Alice thoroughly. Since Alice had already lost her parents and seemed to have no contact with other relatives, we decided to hire a private detective for the investigation. The results showed that she was quite a troublemaker during her middle school days. Moreover, it turned out that she was the leader of a gang. Apparently, the local notorious delinquents would follow her instructions. From her third year of middle school, because of her future prospects, she seemingly became serious and indeed graduated from a national university. But it seemed that she hadn't cut ties with her delinquent group. It was discovered that even now, when Ronald is not at home, she invites her delinquent friends over. What's more, it was revealed that she makes a big fuss in the house, and there have been frequent complaints to the apartment management company from the neighbors. She had been hiding her true nature, but she is actually quite the character.
I can't believe it.
Ronald held his head in disbelief, even considering divorce. However, Alice cried and apologized, saying, "I'm sorry, I absolutely need you. I promise to live earnestly from now on. Please, let's not get divorced," she sobbed, apologizing and returning to her previous appearance. She took out her phone and deleted the contacts of her delinquent friends right in front of him. She even apologized to each of the relatives she had troubled at the New Year's gathering, making phone calls one by one. She called me too and apologized many times. Upon witnessing her in that state, Ronald seemed to have a change of heart, thinking,
"If she's willing to go that far."
They continue their married life without getting a divorce. About the marriage, it's a problem between Alice and Ronald, and as parents, we decided not to interfere and respect his decision. Actually, I met Alice in summer, and she seemed to have returned to the serious woman I met for the first time. I was relieved, thinking that it would be alright. And then one day, while I was lifting a heavy load at my part-time job, I suddenly felt a severe pain in my back and couldn't move from the spot. A fellow worker rushed me to the hospital, and I was told I had a severe case of low back pain and needed to take it easy for a while. When I told Ronald about this over the phone, he said,
"Why don't you and Dad come and live with Alice and me? Since both of you are getting older, I believe injuries and illnesses like the one this time will increase in the future. Having Alice and me nearby when something happens wouldn't be reassuring."
It was certainly a compelling proposition. Once my lower back pain had healed, my husband and I had a discussion with Ronald and Alice, and we decided to move in together. As we were already living in a relatively large house, there was no problem accommodating in four. We had Ronald and Alice move in with us, and we began our life together. Initially, everything seemed to go smoothly. Since Alice started taking care of half of the household chores, my burden has also been lightened. My husband and I decided to contribute $2,000 to the household from our salaries every month. It was a bit of a stretch for me, given that I only worked part-time, but we wanted to alleviate some of the financial burden on our son and his wife. But over time, Alice started to change. She began to complain of ill health and dumped the household chores on me. At first, I took over her duties out of concern for her, but she seemed perfectly healthy to me. She had a good appetite, and her complexion didn't seem bad at all. In fact, she looked healthier than ever. Moreover, the number of days she'd go out and not come back all day increased. "Alice, I don't mean to pry, but are you really feeling ill? You seem to be going out quite a bit, and you look perfectly fine to me." When I finally gathered the courage to ask, she glared at me with sharp eyes. What? Are you doubting me? Don't mess with me, I'll hit you. I was speechless at her coarse language. And then I realized that she hadn't really regretted her previous actions. She had only pretended to be remorseful because she didn't want to break up with Ronald. She seemed to mistake my fear for weakness and sneered at me. What? Are you scared? Well, I guess so. I've been quiet all this time, haven't I? But I've reached my limit. From now on, I'm going to express my individuality and be my true self. You know what will happen if you oppose me, right? Perhaps this was how she used to threaten people when she was a delinquent. And because it had always worked for her, she continued to act this way even now, as an adult. If you asked me whether I was afraid of Alice, I'd have to admit I was. But I have lived for 62 years. I didn't get to this age for nothing. I'm not so weak as to be intimidated or bullied by a former delinquent. Maintaining an attitude of being unaffected by her words and actions, and said, if your harassment goes too far, it could become a crime. I'm not your servant and I won't be pushed around. If you harm me, I won't hesitate to report you to the police, I said coldly. She seemed taken aback by my response, but quickly retorted, Shut up, you old nuisance! I won't forgive you. At Alice's loud scream, my surprised husband and Ronald rushed in. They had been at home, as it was a holiday. I briefly explained the situation to them, and they both frowned. We all decided to have a talk. My husband told Alice,
First, apologize to your mother-in-law.
However, she didn't intend to apologize at all. Instead, she arrogantly crossed her arms and leaned back on the sofa. What? Why should I apologize to this old fool? I agreed to live together because I thought I could offload the household chores onto her, but my burden hasn't decreased, and it's making me feel awful. All she does is get older and isn't helpful at all. There's nothing wrong with being angry at such a useless old woman. Myself, my husband, and Ronald were left speechless. How selfish could Alice be to have moved in with that intention? Then Alice began to say even more outrageous things. No matter what anyone says, I am what I am, and I'm not going to change. From now on, you all are going to be my servants. Oh, but I don't need my father-in-law and mother-in-law who can't even do housework. The senile fools should just leave. Upon hearing those words, I reached my limit and my anger peaked. I had no more patience for this woman. I firmly resolved to teach her a lesson. It seems that my husband shares the same intense anger. My husband, who was usually very calm, seemed angry for once. He said,
Then let's move out now.
I wanted to get away from Alice as soon as possible, so I agreed. Yes, let's do that. After that, my husband and I quickly packed our essentials and left the house. We told them we would come back later to collect our larger belongings. It seemed that Ronald was staying at home to talk to Alice. My husband and I left the house and went to a nearby inexpensive business hotel. We didn't have another house, and we didn't want to suddenly impose on our relatives, so we decided to stay at the business hotel until we found a new place to live. Then, the next day, around 8 a.m., I received a phone call from Alice. I wanted to ignore it, but she persistently called over 20 times in an hour. Even though I regretted not blocking her number, I was curious about what she wanted and ended up answering the call. Hello, is this Miranda? I have a favor to ask you, so I thought I'd give you a call. Alice began speaking in a blatantly flirtatious voice over the phone. I knew she was up to no good, and honestly, it made me feel sick to my stomach. A serious face, a delinquent's face, and this pretentious act. I can't help but wonder how many personalities she possesses. One thing is certain, regardless of which personality, Alice is not a trustworthy person. I thought it was a waste of time and ridiculous to deal with her anymore, so I just said I decline and hung up the phone, and set it to reject incoming calls from her. I blocked all of her emails and messages, making it impossible for her to contact me. Seeing my actions, my husband seemed to understand something and did the same. We as a couple decided to completely cut ties with Alice. In the afternoon, I got a call from Ronald.
Mom, I've divorced Alice. I've also submitted the divorce papers this morning. When I told Alice about the divorce last night, she dared me to go ahead with it, so I didn't hesitate and divorced her.
Hearing this, I made a triumphant gesture, believing my son had made the right decision. There's no way Ronald could ever be happy with a woman like that. I told him that Alice had called dozens of times and for some reason was acting pretentious. Upon hearing this, Ronald told me in disbelief.
She used to act all cute when things didn't go well with her boyfriend during her delinquent days to patch things up. She's really stupid to think that such childish trick would still work now.
I agreed with his opinion. Despite claiming to be a graduate from a national university, she is psychologically immature and arrogant. I believe we made the right decision to cut ties with such a person. However, that wasn't the end of his story.
And Alice, she was cheating too.
What? Cheating? I couldn't hide my surprise. After all that she's done, she was also cheating.
I thought her claims of being unwell were lies. She seemed perfectly healthy and I was bothered by her frequent outings. I had a feeling she was hiding something, so I hired a detective agency to investigate. And there she was, cheating with a man I don't know. I even have photographic evidence.
Looking at the evidence photo that Ronald sent to my smartphone, there was Alice and a young man kissing on the street. The man had blonde hair and looked like a typical playboy.
I'm serious about claiming compensation for damages from her and the guy she was cheating with. I've told her this as well. Well, she was full of confidence, saying, "Try if you can."
I see. Then why did she call me?
I don't know for sure, but I guess she was trying to find out where I was since I left. She didn't think I would leave and probably thought if she acted tough, I'd be there for her. But in reality, I've left, and she was probably flustered and trying to get close.
I was at a loss for words. Well, regardless of the reason, I don't have the slightest intention of helping her. She should experience loneliness and suffer on her own. And then our new home was decided, my husband, Ronald, and I. Yes, we decided to live together in a certain apartment. We considered evicting Alice from the house and living there together there, but the house is too big and too much to manage for Ronald alone after we pass away. There's also a chance it could become vacant, so we decided to sell it instead. Ronald also agreed, saying,
I'm not particularly attached to a single-family home, so I think it's okay to sell it.
As a result, she would lose her place to live, but that's none of our concern anymore. Later, we decided to go back to the old house to retrieve the large items that were still there, along with our relative who offered to help. When we entered the house, Alice welcomed us with a creepy smile. I realized, after being alone, that I'm vulnerable to loneliness. Would you all like to live together again as a group? Oh, and I want to save money, so I don't want to pay compensation for damages to Ronald. I couldn't hold back my anger at Alice, who dared to make such a bold request without even apologizing. When you ask for a favor, you should normally be more humble. Stop being so flippant and arrogant. But regardless of how you ask, there's no way I'd listen to your request now. Following me, my husband also coldly said,
We've decided to sell this house. Get out as soon as possible, and make sure to pay compensation for damages to Ronald. I can't love you anymore. I have no intention of getting back together, so stop it.
Ronald also expresses his anger towards Alice. Then, seemingly considering it futile, Alice suddenly stops pretending to be innocent. At first, I was attracted to the stability of Ronald's income, and I thought I could relax if I got married and became a housewife. But now, I currently have absolutely no ulterior motives. I truly love you. Of course, I also need and cherish my in-laws, Miranda and Jack. No matter how beautifully she phrases it now, it wouldn't quell the anger of us. On the contrary, it only made us angrier. At that time, our relative, who had been silently watching the situation, intervened out of concern.
Alice, you are the worst kind of person. If you have so much to say, why not try going one-on-one with me? You seem proud of your strength, but well, I've also made it to the national championships in boxing.
Our relative cornered her, his gaze sharp and intense. A formidable aura oozed from the relative. Indeed, this relative was a man in his 30s with significant strength. His claim of making it to the national championships was true. I intentionally called him just in case Alice throws a tantrum. No, I don't want a one-on-one. She appeared to be intimidated, seemingly losing to his force.
Once the move is over, never involve yourself with Miranda and the others again. Apologize and get out of here right away.
With the relative's firm words, she seemed to understand, possibly out of fear. I understand. I will leave right now. I will give you my furniture and other large items. I am truly sorry. She apologized and even pleaded to us, quickly gathering her things and leaving the house quickly. Seeing this, the relative laughed triumphantly.
She can only be assertive towards those weaker than herself. When faced with someone she perceives as stronger, she quickly bows down. She's a classic example of a person with no backbone.
My husband, Ronald, and I laughed out loud, watching her run away. The intruder was gone and preparations for the move progressed smoothly. Now we can safely move to our new home. Later, it seems that Alice rented an apartment and started living alone. Of course, Ronald claimed compensation as he had declared. Perhaps because of the notice through a lawyer, both Alice and her affair partner readily made the payment. They probably agreed readily because the opponent was a lawyer, a person of considerable power. As the relative has said, she can't stand up to someone stronger than herself. Since then, I have had no relation with her, but I have kept track of what she's doing, because she was reported to be arrested in the news recently. Combining the contents of the news, the information obtained from acquaintances, and my own experiences, her life seems to be as follows. Firstly, Alice's savings were almost depleted as a result of paying the compensation. She tried to get her lover to marry her and support her, but he disappeared without a trace, and contact was lost. She had no choice but to rejoin a general company, but she spewed abuse at her boss and resigned immediately. Then, unabashed, she came to me, my husband, and Ronald's workplace, begging for money. Of course, we three decided to completely ignore her and did not engage at all, so she eventually gave up and stopped showing up. Afterwards, Alice accumulated more debt and found herself in even greater financial trouble. Despite relying on her delinquent friends, it seems that no one was willing to help the fallen Alice. Enraged, Alice severely assaulted one of her delinquent friends and was finally arrested and sent to prison. Upon hearing that story, both my husband and Ronald thought, "Serves her right." She has been a troublemaker since her student days. Even as an adult, she feigned remorse on the surface, but it seems she hadn't reflected at all. For a woman like her, perhaps prison is the right place. I hope she re-evaluates her past actions. Now I'm spending peaceful days with my husband and Ronald. Currently, the three of us are getting along and planning a trip for the upcoming holidays. The apartment is smaller than a single-family house, which makes cleaning easier, and it's also convenient as it's near the station. I genuinely think moving was the right decision. I want to continue living peacefully with my family.